Welcome into the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. I am Dan Wiederer, back from a short holiday break and happy to be joined today by my good friend, Mark Potash of the arch rival Chicago Sun-Times. Mark, how you doing?
I am enjoying my summer and looking forward to camp. It never gets better than this right now, Dan.
I apologize for interrupting your summer. We've still got about 2 weeks, a little bit more than 2 weeks before we have to lock in for the long haul with the 2024 Bears. Obviously, a very exciting offseason, a very exciting season ahead. And I thought it would be fun today to kind of focus our attention on the four most important people in the Bears organization right now, which from the top down would be Kevin Warren, Ryan Poles, Matt Eberflus, and Caleb Williams. And so I have a question about each of those guys as we go through this to kind of to steer our discussion and figure out how those four people can be instrumental in creating direction and momentum for the Bears in 2024. But before we go there, when you talk about your own sort of excitement or anticipation, I guess it would be for training camp, what's different or unique in your mind about this given training camp, given all of the buildup that has occurred since the end of last season to now that leads us to that stage?
I would just say, Dan, everything seems more legitimate. I mean, I've written about, talked about, we all have hope for the last 20, 30 years for Bears teams. And I can't think of a team that has not been to the playoffs in a couple of years that has more legitimate reason for optimism than, in the last 20, 30 years, going back to maybe Lovey in 2005, I guess. I mean, I think, you're like I say, your quarterback is Caleb Williams, who we don't know anything about on the field. But he's, the number one overall pick. He would have been the number one overall pick in many other years. He wasn't just a default number one. He's considered by some the best quarterback prospect since Luck, or at least in recent years, since Joe Burrow, maybe, whatever. But he's just more legitimate than either Justin Fields or Mitch Trubisky. So that's just this one thing. I mean, even the little things like, your right tackle. You're hoping that a guy like Darnell Wright can be a perennial All-Pro. That's different than expecting and hoping that Charles Leno can be a perennial All-Pro. He was a 7th round draft pick.
Yep.
Darnell Wright is a 10th overall pick who was pretty good as a rookie. So there's many instances of that. That's the difference this year. That's why I'm normally a skeptic, but I say it's okay to be optimistic, because same thing I said last year is, it's okay to be optimistic about this Bears team, because if they do fail, and that does happen, you won't be saying, what was I thinking? We know what you were thinking. You were thinking they had very legitimate reasons to be good,
right,
and more than just the two examples I gave. So I think that's probably, the biggest thing is, instead of hope, I think there's more expectation. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, and I think it is a barometer that Ryan Poles as the general manager set to get this team expecting good things instead of just hoping for good things. And I think you're right on that. I reflect back on 2019, and that season didn't end where anyone expected it to end, but going in, that was legitimate hope. Like, that was you weren't grasping for the hope. The hope was real and it was there. And now you have to find a way to turn that into results. And the Bears will do that. Since you brought up Caleb, why don't we start there and we'll work our way up the food chain at Hallis Hall. All eyes are going to be on this young man from the second he reports back to training camp on July 16th until this season ends. And you've covered enough of these to know that the 5, 6, 7 week build up to the regular season can be full of noise that doesn't mean anything, overreactions to certain practices. When you think about Caleb Williams' first training camp as a Chicago Bear, and you think about that period between the rookie report date and Labor Day, really, when the regular season kicks in and week 1 gets underway, what is the most important thing in your eyes that you're going to be looking for when we're out at practice at Hallis Hall to feel like Caleb Williams is answering the early call to be the quarterback that everyone hopes him to be in Chicago?
I would say, Dan, not knowing a whole lot. I'm not a film watcher. I don't know, about mechanics and things like that, and footwork and that. I just want to see players respond to him. I want to see him make players better right from the start. I want to see players perform better for him than they would for like Justin Fields or Mitch Trubisky. And I think that's an indication that he would be ready to start. Long ago, this was a really odd thing to have even a number 1 pick as your first starter. I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago. And so that's a big step for the Bears, not only to make him number one, but make no question about it. And I think that's actually one of the best things they've done. I think, even though it's a double-edged sword, it could fail, but on the other hand, just as they made that step is good. So I think that's, given that he's expected to be the starter, I think I just want him to continue to do what he's been doing, and that's look the part. And I just can't be any more specific than that, because I just don't know enough about the position. But that's in general what I'll be looking for, that none of this is fake, and that we're not, and we're not kind of building up like false hope.
I feel like there's a T-shirt to be made there. Look the part. We can start selling those T-shirts. We have a little picture of Caleb's face and say, look the part. And I'm with you to that end. There's a couple things for me that as we walk in to that training camp grind and whatever you want to call it, look, like you share a cubicle, you're right to my left inside that media room at Hallis Hall. And I'm reminding myself that every day after I leave practice and after we sit through the press conferences, to just like take a walk out by the birdhouse out front and take a breath and exhale and get a little perspective before I sit down at my keyboard and start typing up these grand conclusions to that day's practice, because it's very easy to fall into that trap, especially when the live tweeting is going on during practices. You see it as much as I do. And it's very easy to say, oh, Chase Claypool's dominating training camp, as some did last year. And some of us said, hold on a minute. Let's see him get through the month of August without getting hurt or having any emotional flare-ups, and then we'll say he's dominating. Anyway, that's an example of where overreaction gets out in front of it. But for me with Caleb, I always talk about at the quarterback position, there's like the 3 C's, and you have to be comfortable first, and then you have to be confident, and then you have to gain command of the position. And so I want to see him climbing that stair step, gradually through training camp of being noticeably comfortable and then noticeably confident. And the command can come in the regular season. We don't need that to happen before week 1, but I would like to see that comfort and confidence grow. And then the other part of it for me, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, is the psychological stamina, I guess, for lack of a better term, of living this existence now, living this Hard Knocks cameras, every eyeball in Chicago, every sports talk radio show talking round the clock about your performance every single day, having to come in, once every 7 or 8 practices and talk to the media and answer some hard questions. Does he have the same energy that he showed us in April and May and June at the end of August as he's had so far? Because he does seem to have a very natural, infectious, and magnetic charisma to him. But he hasn't been through an avalanche of, oh my God, it's going sideways. And I'm really curious to see kind of how he handles that when camp is that everyday sort of pressure cooker that it will be.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, the honeymoon will end kind of quickly in that regard, because another facet to this that you ask about, what's the difference between now and before, is this defense is going to challenge him from the first day in pads in practice. And I can tell already. You could see from the way it was in OTAs how competitive that's going to be. So right away, he's going to face more than he's ever faced before, at least since joining the Bears. And it'll be an interesting thing for him, because I always say about Caleb Williams, he has a voice, but he's still finding it, and he's at a point where he doesn't want to overstep his bounds. It's been actually pretty impressive. Well, that had to be pretty frustrating, the way that defense was going after him, even in OTAs. And I'm sure there were times where he really wanted to give it back. And I think as camp goes on, he's going to give it back. So I'm looking forward to that part of it. But to your point, we're going to see right away how well he can handle, because he's going to jump right into the fire as the number 1 guy. He's not sharing first team reps with anybody. He's the guy. And the questions are going to be, however often, not very often actually, that he'll talk to us.
Yeah.
He's going to get questions about that. How does the defense make you better? That kind of, stuff we were asking Justin Fields last year. And, I'll be honest, I thought Justin Fields handled that pretty well too. So even that can be kind of a false flag.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, but it will be a challenge. And like I said, the honeymoon will end in that regard, I think, fairly quickly, because it's just more real once camp starts.
It's more real and it's more intense than it's ever been. We talk about the Chicago media and how, omnipresent it's going to be, particularly during training camp. Well, this is national now. And especially when you bring the Hard Knocks cameras and you talk about First Take and all the other sports talk debate shows that are going to be weighing in on this, on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, there is going to be an avalanche of coverage of this young man. And he is obviously lived in the spotlight for a long time, but this is a new level of spotlight, in my opinion. And watching him kind of surf that wave is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm kind of bracing myself because like you were saying before, it's all overreactive,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is magnified. His reaction is magnified. Our reaction to his reaction is magnified, and his reaction to our reaction to his reaction is
Yep.
everything is so magnified. I'm not denigrating your point. It's a good point. I'm just saying we have to take that step back that you want to take and just
Right.
say what does this really mean? That's in my old age. I'm finding I'm saying that more and more. That's why I didn't really do a whole lot in the off season, because I just can't wait to get to see when the bell rings in September. And so that's the question we have to, how much does it really matter? So I think we should be aware. That's going back to your other point, is you have to overreact to what he reacts to. But it will be interesting to see how. I absolutely will be. That's his whole thing. He's got to be able to handle this. This spotlight. And it will be interesting from the beginning. So far it's like I'm like, wow, is this guy for real? Because the reputation in the beginning, it's almost the opposite of this guy who was totally into his own brand and wanted
Right.
part ownership of the team and didn't want to play for the Bears. And now he seems like he's got the same attitude as Mitch Trubisky coming in and just happy to be here and wants to get along with everybody. He's just I've said it before. He's hitting all the right notes from the claw on down. He's just hit the perfect spot. It'll be interesting to see once things get real how well he'll handle it. But I'm pretty confident he will. But we'll see. He's still got to sign a contract, so
Yeah,
there's
no
going to be
doubt.
bumps,
Yeah.
there's going to be
Hopefully,
bumps in the road eventually, and we'll see.
hopefully he's there. David and I always joke that the Take the North audience is the smartest audience in football podcast, and I know that they are smart enough to follow you on Twitter and understand that as you're interpreting what does this really mean through training camp, that it won't always be a straightforward reaction. You may have a couple sarcastic, cryptic tweaks. This is my guess. This is a prediction for the month of August, that there may be a couple tweets that certain people out there may not be able to interpret properly, but the Take the North audience understands you, Mark Potash, and they'll be able to read between the lines on those tweets. So I'm looking forward to that. You did mention the defense. The overseer of that defense, to some extent, is still Matt Eberflus, the head coach. The head coach of this football team, in my opinion, has a lot to prove in his third season at the helm. We know he's got a new look. We know he's had a little bit of a different demeanor and a new comfort when he's met with the press since last season ended. And remember, last season ended with a lot of people wondering if he was still going to have his job the next time that they had a press conference. And so here he is going into a pivotal third season with a lot to prove. I'm just curious, as you kind of put your lens on Matt this season, what he needs to prove to you in the 2024 season for you to feel like Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren made the right decision in retaining him when they had a very easy opportunity to reboot coming out of 2023.
Well, I'm not sure if this will ensue, but I think one thing is he's going to have to prove that he can handle success. I mean, if this team starts winning? How does how does he handle that? And I think so far, I think what we've seen, especially the growth from year 1 to year 2, is he's a really good defensive coordinator. But as a head coach, I can't say he's made a lot of egregious errors in game management and team management. That obviously that rough start last year with the Alan Williams situation, David Walker situation, those were not, that was not Matt at his, he did not succeed there. That was not a good look for him, but boy, he came out of it pretty good. And I think he grew himself there. And I think I don't know is my answer, because we have to see when they start winning games and have chances to win games, which they will with this defense. How does he make a difference? How does he make a difference?
That's it.
Let's face it. I mean, he can be Brian Billick and a guy who won a Super Bowl without really being, in my opinion, a great head coach, but he knew how to manage a team that wasn't even strong on his side of the ball. I mean, it was just that's like the one example of a guy who, maybe you don't really regard as one of the great coaches of all time, but he won a Super Bowl and had a lot of success just by being a good manager of people. And I think that's what I've seen, is that's one of Matt Eberflus's strengths, is management of people, because they've had a lot of adversity in these first 2 years. And so far, I think everybody's held up, but you still got to win. It's still more important to prove how you handle success than how you handle failure, in my opinion. And I think that's going to be the big test. I'm presuming that will be the big test if they have a winning season as predicted.
Yeah, like, and for me, when you think back to 2023, I think there are a lot of moments in close games that either your head coach or your quarterback can help you out of, right? And the quarterback's got to make the plays. The coach has got to figure out a way to manage situations. And I don't get stuck on them, but I think back to the loss at home to Denver. I think back to the loss in Detroit to the Lions. I think back to that loss in Cleveland. 3 pretty catastrophic blown lead losses for the Bears in 2023 that say, man, it wasn't there something the head coach could have done in each of those games to kind of stop the bleeding, and to help put the thing back on the track. And so if Matt is going to take this team forward, if this team is going to compete for a playoff berth in 2024, when you're in those games, not even just the close games, but the games you have in hand, and you've got your claws in them, you got to figure out a way as a coach to finish those. And that's putting your players in position to close those out. It's making decisions. It's managing those in ways that get you across the finish line. So I really want to see that. That's one thing I want to see. And I'd imagine you'd agree to some extent that those 3 losses are ones that are kind of indelible on his resume until he finds a way to erase them with some of his coaching on the successful side.
Yeah, I agree, but I just think right now, Matt Eberflus's strength is just getting players to play for him. And I just haven't seen enough evidence that he makes the difference, that he does exactly what you're talking about. And one path to success is being so respected by your players that they play above, their level and just play for you and just make plays. Their focus is better because they respect you. And right now, that's Matt Eberflus's strength right now, because we just don't know. We haven't seen that he has orchestrated an end of game situation to, like you're saying, to put the team over the top. Right now, it's on having Caleb Williams throwing to Keenan Allen in a key third down. Right now, that's what makes Matt Eberflus a good coach, in my opinion. Right, that's where they stand right now.
Well, and here's the other part of that, and because I don't think you can, particularly in this particular circumstance, stand back and say, "Go to work, offense, not my job." And I think quarterback development is one of the biggest parts of taking this Bears team from to we're going to be in the mix every single year for the next decade. And Matt Eberflus has to be the chief overseer of quarterback development. Now that means positioning his handpicked guys, Shane Waldron and Thomas Brown and Kerry Joseph, in ways that allow them to bring the best out of Caleb Williams. And this is something that Matt doesn't have in his background. He can talk about his experience watching Dak Prescott develop in Dallas. He can talk a little bit about being around Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis, but he has never shown the ability to put fingerprints on a quarterback and bring them to a higher level. Well, this is part of the job now. And when your organization invests the number 1 overall pick and expresses a vote of confidence in you to be the person to lead that quarterback forward, you have to do something to take that quarterback to a higher level. Now, again, if that just simply means empowering Shane Waldron to be at his best in a way that allows Caleb Williams to be at his best, then figure it out. But Matt, I think, has to have a really, really significant chunk of the responsibility of making sure that the development of Caleb Williams goes accordingly.
Yeah, and it's a really fine touch. I mean, it goes, I think back about like when Matt Nagy on the other side, on the flip side of that, Matt Nagy's strength was that he left Vic Fangio totally alone.
Right.
But you can't do that on the flip side of that, because the quarterback just has the ball every play. So it's a fine touch, especially in this day and age when there are already so many voices in a quarterback's ear already, from Shane Waldron on down.
Yeah.
To quarterbacks coach, everybody. So you've got to worry about being too much and having too much of overdoing it, I guess. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a really fine touch for a manager. But again, I think managing people, I think it seems to be a strength of Eberflus, and I think I'm confident he'll be able to handle it. I think it's more, I'll be honest, the quarterback development thing for me is more on Shane Waldron and developing an offense that doesn't force Caleb Williams to carry this team on his shoulders too early.
Yep.
I think he will eventually, but too early. And so I think Eberflus's management of that situation, you're right, it's absolutely imperative that he handles it correctly. But I think the most important factor, Shane Waldron will dominate that because he controls not only the quarterback but the offense that gives the quarterback a chance to succeed. And that's the big factor this year, is giving the quarterback a rookie quarterback a chance to succeed.
Well, let's not forget also that helping a quarterback manage expectations requires a defense that allows you to take some pressure off that quarterback. And so hopefully Matt will put his fingerprints and continue building on the momentum that they had late last year. I think everyone in that defense feels like they made a breakthrough late in 2023 and that they want to continue that and go to a higher level in 2024. We'll see where they go there. Matt's boss, Ryan Poles, as you know, has really kind of been taking a victory parade this offseason. He had a lot of hard work to do when the season ended. It started again, as we mentioned, with kind of figuring out what to do with the coaching staff, then figuring out what to do with the then starting quarterback Justin Fields, then figuring out what to do in free agency, then figuring out what to do in the draft. And it feels like when the dust settled on the 2024 offseason, the world is ready to have what you do on Twitter every once in a while, the parade route, to the Petrillo Bandshell downtown for Ryan Poles, because he's put this team in a position to be competitive. I'm curious, this is year 3 for him as well. He made the trade for Keenan Allen. He's done a lot of things with the roster to shape it up competitively. Where do you stand in your confidence level with who Ryan is as a general manager and where he has this team positioned to go, not just in 2024, but for the next 5 years, because that's kind of what the job is?
I think this is going to be a huge year for Poles, but I have to say I like what he's doing. I like the way he's handled his position. I think this will be a good test of his intuition about players and how they fit and how good they are. And Caleb Williams, he locked into Caleb Williams, as it turned out, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it only took, I think, that very first meeting to really figure out that this was his guy. And that's when you saw the lengths he went to confirm that, it'll be a real interesting test of just how much he knows about people. And I'm pretty confident. I think he's pretty good about that. It's interesting to me that his biggest mistake since he's been the GM of the Bears is on a player that he had the least intel on, which was Chase Claypool. Yeah. That was his one big gaffe. So it wasn't like he did all this, it wasn't like he looked at Mitch Trubisky for an entire off season or whatever, decided this is his guy, and it turned out to be a bust. This is he swung and missed on a guy who he just had was just taking a flyer on. And he's responded from that very well and picking up, I think, good people and the right people. So I guess to me, that illustrates that he has good intuition about people. And I think that's the biggest part of his job, is knowing who will fit, who can be motivated, who will fit with whom, I guess. And so I am at this point, I'm bullish on Poles. I think he's done a good job. I think he has a lot of potential, but that's the story of the season. This year we'll find out. This is the year we'll find, because now he has the roster that he wants. He totally tore down Pace's roster. Now, and then he was in the interim phase last year. Now he has the roster. I'd say most of these guys are in positions, there aren't many. I don't mean to get off topic here, but there aren't too many holding pattern guys. I mean, Javon Brisker, Kyler Gordon, T.J. Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, those, Jervon Dexter, even those are not placeholder guys. He's got, even on the offensive line, maybe a spot or two, but in general, he's got his people in place. And so I think this will be a good this season. And you talk about 4 or 5 years. This season in particular will tell us a lot about Poles and his intuition, his judgment about players, how they fit, how good they are, just how good they are for the culture that he's so big on, that everybody's so big on. And so my answer would be, I really like what he's done. I think there's evidence that he can be really good at this job.
It's the players. It's also the coaches, because let's remember that he made the vote to double down on Matt Eberflus going in this year, and then gave Matt the authority to go out and find new offensive assistants. They overhauled that offensive coaching staff, and so now there are no more excuses. Pretty much everyone on this roster is yours. Cole Kmet is one of the few holdovers from the Ryan Pace era. Well, Ryan Poles signed him to a much deserved extension, and off they go. And so now this is all yours, right? Like you've had this in place, and so it's going to be really fascinating. I think one of the things that's impressive, we've got a couple Chase Claypool references here already on this podcast, but that didn't make Ryan trigger shy. The fact that he went and traded midseason for Montez Sweat, the fact that he was aggressive again this March and trading for Keenan Allen and not sort of worrying about failure and instead attacking success was impressive to me. I think it showed a level of discipline, I guess, but also commitment to your vision, to not be fearful of what happens if it doesn't work out. And that's a strength, in my opinion. And when you're able to show that, to acknowledge your mistakes, get past them quickly, and then not be fearful of taking the same swing in a new way again. I thought that was impressive as well.
Yeah, I think that's it's funny that it was his worst episode, but I think it did show, you could point to some things. I mean, it cost him a pretty high draft pick, and it didn't produce much on the field, but it showed he can admit a mistake, because he made that trade fairly early. I think he didn't double down on that.
Yeah.
And also I feel like he has the ability to learn. I think if I have a pet thing, a trait that I like about everything in sports, it's the ability to learn, because not everybody is great from the beginning. It's how well you learn. I think it showed he has the ability to learn from his mistake and realize that. And he's, like I said, his acquisitions have been much better. But again, he's been able to do a little more intel and research on the players. I think that was part of the lesson. Is, I think he kind of broke from what he wanted to do in that. I think he kind of caved into the pressure that a lot of us put on him. I think to, hey, get some support for Fields. You're hanging Fields out to dry. He responded to that and realized that it was a mistake to get the player he did. Maybe there was somebody else, but I guess my point is he learned from his mistake. He learned, Poles seems to learn well, and he's got a really good demeanor. I mean, I really like it. There's probably a fire in him that we don't see. He's probably
for sure there is
something. I'm sure there is. But boy, even when you see him like in the press box during games and stuff, and you see him react and stuff, it's in him. But boy, he's got like the perfect demeanor, even in press conferences and stuff. The way, hey, I asked him in a press conference, did you consider hiring Jim Harbaugh right in front of Matt Eberflus? And he didn't flinch a bit. And that was a difficult question. A lot of people wanted to answer. I know that wasn't probably the best thing I could have done there. But anyway, he in situations like that, he did not flinch at all. And in general, he's just kind of unflappable. And that's not that doesn't mean you're going to be good at what you do, but it means, I think it means you have a much better chance to be better than these guys who fly off the handle and overreact. And
I agree,
and just
get caught on that roller coaster. I think it's notable that you brought that up, because one of the things that I found really significant this offseason is that they crossed the bridge from the combine toward the pro day circuit. That there was, as you mentioned a couple minutes ago, a very early and natural connection between Ryan and Caleb Williams, and you started to hear that those two guys kind of connected very quickly because they have similar demeanors. It's a very, very steady, quiet confidence that you feel. They don't have to be in your face with it. You just feel it. You're like, this guy is very confident in who he is and what he's doing, and he's not going to be deterred off of that just because the wind blows one way. And so I thought that was neat, just to see those two guys go from a point where they were like, we're trying to feel it out, I want to know more about you, to like, oh yeah, we're in this together, and now we're married, and now let's roll. And that feels like it's going forward. The other guy that's had full-throated confidence in Ryan is Kevin Warren, president of the organization. He's obviously in charge of overseeing football to the extent that he makes those decisions and helps Ryan Poles do his job to the best of his ability. But he also has this stadium project on his plate, Potsy. And that's where I want to end on this episode, because there was a report out of the Daily Herald this past weekend that Arlington Heights has proposed a settlement to some of the property tax discrepancy that's been out there, that is kind of forced the Bears to go in the pivot that they went into, making downtown Chicago their chief priority with the stadium project. It remains to be seen what is going to happen with this proposal. I know the mayor of Arlington Heights, Tom Hayes, said that the Bears are at least listening. The Bears, obviously, in April made it very clear that when you stand up in that giant press conference and you put up renderings and you really emphatically say that downtown Chicago is your ideal site for this new stadium, you've made a play, you've planted your flag. Really interested to see where that goes. This is a long way of asking you, what is Kevin's responsibility right now, and how much pressure should he be feeling to establish clear direction and clarity on where the stadium project is going? Because I think you're probably with me in saying that here on July 2nd, 2024, we thought we'd be further along with the advancements of all of this than we are at this stage.
Yeah, I think the pressure's on him to, almost by his own statements, to get things done, because the problem he has is that, he says, time is money. I mean, he's been very, resolute about that it's got to get done quickly. But the Chicago thing, just inherently, in and of itself, is going to take time for hoops to, all those hoops to be, for him to go through all those hoops. So, yeah, I mean, if it lingers, is that going to hurt the Bears? I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know that much about stadium situations to know. I do know this, and I've said it before, is the one good thing is, like, they're going to end up with a good stadium wherever they go. But if the question is, do they have to get something done now, right away? I'll be honest, I don't know. I mean,
not even done, but just movement, right? Like, just some sense of okay, that there's obvious direction and there's obvious support, which I think is the hard part right now in the political climate, is drumming up the support for it to get that snowball rolling a little bit. And I think that's maybe what they're lacking right now, that I thought that there would at least be wheels moving, and it feels like the wheels are kind of stuck in the mud right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think I guess what I would say is there really needs to be some, he needs to figure out, let's put it this way. He can't hang on to the Chicago dream too long. Let's put it that way. I mean, that's such an odd situation. And I always say this, I've said this many times. It's so Bears that, Ted had one vision, and then they hired a guy to replace him with a totally different vision. And
those visions were sandwiched between a purchase agreement of $197 million on a 326-acre property, right?
And the destruction of one of the great race courses in Chicago, in America.
Thank you for bringing that up too, because I miss it in the summers.
Just because there's no horse racing now doesn't mean the climate for horse racing won't be there one day. So that is a loss for Chicago. But yeah, anyway, I guess it's, at what point does Kevin Warren, my viewpoint of it right now, because I've been all over the board on this thing. I mean, I like Chicago was my favorite place to go to, but when I saw the plans in Arlington Heights, I thought that is the best option. And then when they had the thing in Chicago, I thought that would be great if they could do that. And now I'm like, just get Arlington Heights done and forget about it. Okay. Just get it out of the way. But I think Kevin's problem is, I think he likes to win. And I think this is a tough L to take for him to not have Chicago. But it sure looks like his most prudent and best option is Arlington Heights, and the tax certainty that they're looking for. I'm sorry, a team that makes that as much money as the Bears and as much income as the Bears, and is going to have more income. I always say this: the Bears, they can worry about their tax rate on the Arlington Heights property. The Bears, and I can say this as an Arlington Heights property owner, they're one of the few property owners who knows that their income is going to be far greater than any tax increase in the next 10 years. The television contract assures that. So right. I guess what I'm saying, there's no reason for them to, fiddle around to let that tax certainty become the impediment to the project. It should be, if they wanted to have it done, they could have it done. It's as simple as that.
The other thing I come back to is just the fact that, like, I'm a sucker for renderings. Believe me, renderings and video presentations, they suck me in every single time. And when you see the one downtown, you go, man, that's magnificent. That's really, really cool. And then you go, look at the amount of property they have in Arlington Heights. You could build a virtual fantasy land there with anything you want: restaurants, hotels, amenities, playing fields, like hotel, like the whole thing, like the complex itself could be so grand. Kevin is a grand thinker, and eventually it may require a pivot into, like, I know you love the skyline, I know you love the lake with the clean water that you can swim in, but like the idea of potentially just and not only building the fantasy land there, but understanding that it's just a fire hydrant of revenue once you open it up, like it's just going to be squirting money at you if you do it right. It feels like that's where it should end up. But hey, look, like this has had a lot of twists and turns already. There's going to be more to come. Just thought it was interesting over the weekend that Arlington Heights got their voice back out there and saying, don't forget about us, and trying to say that the Bears are saying, yeah, we haven't forgotten about you yet. We got you. We'll listen and we'll have the discussions, even if we're still putting our central focus on downtown.
Yeah, it's so funny, Dan, that the Bears, this is a team that has for years rented Soldier Field from a park district for their stadium for 50 years. And then they came up with this huge project that just very un-McCaskey like. That's just not their, that's not the way they do. That was my first, when I saw those, I was at Hershey High School when they had that meeting. And I thought, wow, that doesn't seem like the Bears. But as it turns out, that is exactly this is their Bears' chance to join the real world and have revenue streams that can keep them relevant for years and do what they want to do. So it's like goes against what they're about, because they're really a modest family, and they don't really think big in general. I think that's been one of the big problems, is that they don't think big in every facet, from hiring people to signing players to whatever. But boy, this project, like you said, when you saw the opportunity, it seemed like a no-brainer. And then they hired Kevin Warren and threw it. This, if Ted were still here, it'd be a done deal.
Yeah, there's no question. And
we'll want Kevin, but that's the paradox. You want Kevin Warren. You don't want Ted. No offense to Ted. You don't want him being your team president. You want Kevin Warren being your team president.
Right.
Yet that's already caused a complication in one of the big things he's been hired for. It's very typical. Only Caleb Williams can get them out of this one.
Sometimes the wrinkles that you need to iron are a little more stubborn, and you got to really press the steam button and really get some of those wrinkles out of there.
And the thing is, Dan, if you win, I guess what I was saying, but referring to before, is if you win on the football field, it's all good.
That's right.
And so let's get back to what it really comes down to, is that this season can really be a savior for all four of the people we've talked about. And that's probably the biggest potential. I think the biggest thing going into the season, for us, I guess I should speak for myself. I'm looking forward to the season as much as any I have, because this is going to be a newsy year. No matter what the Bears do. There's one little sweet spot. If they finish like 8-9 or 9-8 maybe, and then don't really show any spark, that it would be fairly typical. But other than that, it's going to be either kind of a disappointment or really, really promising for the future. So it's going to be a great year to cover the Bears. It's going to be a great year to watch the Bears. And I think so, not to get you off track of your original point, but I think that's kind of a theme of this season, is just, the optimism and the legitimacy of the optimism is kind of rules all as we stand here in July.
Two things happen when the calendar flips to July. Number one, you feel the walls of your summer closing in on you. And I know it causes me heart palpitations because I want summer to last longer. But then you get that excitement of realizing that the first day of that practice, when those stands are filled beside training camp and that juice is kind of pumping through the air, you're like, this is why we do this. And I know you're looking forward to that as much as I am. Mark, you're a natural at this. I always tell you that. I always enjoy talking to you. You did such a good job today. I'm going to bring you back here for a mailbag segment. It's a holiday week, so people need to listen to this episode when they're driving to their lake houses, wherever they're going, and then they're going to have the little mailbag episode to bring them back. So don't go anywhere. But thank you for joining us for this episode. That's Mark Potash. I'm Dan Wiederer. This is Take the North. Listen, subscribe, tell your friends, and we'll be back very soon with some more Bears insight and analysis. Take care.